There needs to be a really full exposition by Lord Cameron of what's been going on, and also about what his intentions are for dealing with the Chinese Communist Party and China.
I suppose, first of all, to put it in its context, then, how concerned are you about Lord Cameron's links to China, given his new role as Foreign Secretary?
Well, I suppose the obvious answer is that he should have as many links as possible, because we need to talk to China and we need to work and trade with China. But looking at the truly excellent report, I thought, in the Times today about this issue of his links, I think two things jumped out at me immediately. I mean, the first is a great lack of transparency. I mean, he's not saying, his office is not saying whether the study tour which you referred to was repeated in last year. He's not saying a whole range of things about the Colombo port, whether he met the Chinese people in charge. I mean, you've got proof that he did, but he said in the past, or they tried to obfuscate that fact and cover it up. And I think this goes to one of the issues that really matters, and that's transparency. It's the bedrock of democracy. It's what differentiates us, I think, from autocracy and dictatorships, and we lose it at our peril. And I note from Transparency International that the UK last year, is the only one of 5 countries that's fallen by 5 or more points, and we're at the lowest position ever. Incidentally, there's other countries we're in noble company there, with Qatar, Myanmar, Azerbaijan, and Oman. And let me just quote to you what the head of Transparency International UK says. I think it's extraordinarily relevant to the Lord Cameron issue. This sharp fall in the UK's score is a powerful indictment of a recent decline in standards in government and controls over the use of taxpayer money. These findings should set alarm bells ringing in Downing Street. The underlying data clearly indicate that business executives and other experts are concerned about insufficient controls on the abuse of public office and increasingly view corruption and bribery as a real issue in Britain. This is the strongest signal yet that slipping standards are being noticed on the world stage. So I think this just makes the point that, as does your article, that there needs to be a really full exposition by Lord Cameron of what's been going on, and also about what his intentions are for dealing with the Chinese Communist Party and China. Might we indeed have a strategy for China, as some of us have been calling for over 5 or 6 years, including the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament and more recently the Intelligence and Security Committee. So that was the first thing that came out to me.
Yeah.
Transparency suffers.
I understand. I suppose, though, to what extent, Charles, should we consider that to become Foreign Secretary, he has gone through what must be a reasonably rigorous vetting process, and indeed to be approved to become Lord Cameron. There's another process involved in that. And the activities between his time as Prime Minister and his time of being vetted now, he's a private citizen. And actually, we should trust the vetting process that exists and judge Lord Cameron on his actions as Foreign Secretary rather than his business trips over the last few years.
Well, forgive me not being an expert in the vetting process of the House of Lords, but if you look at how many people are in them and some of their origins and behaviours, I'm not sure how vigorous that vetting process is. But I'm sure that from a security point of view, that David Cameron has been properly vetted, and I've no doubts as to his loyalties. I do sometimes feel that it's essential that, as I said earlier, that he shows that he will put the country's interests above his own interests.
But we need to judge that based on his actions now, don't we? Rather than sort of looking back and saying you were trying to secure some investment back then and that's causing us concern. Surely it's about how he behaves now.
Indeed, and that brings me to my second point, that if the Prime Minister and Lord Cameron wish to reassure us about the future, because that's what we're as you rightly say, we need to think about, then I think one of the best ways to do that would be to revamp and give teeth to Akoba. That's the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments. Because David Cameron, I suspect the likelihood is that he'll only be in office for a maximum of 14 months. And then you have to say, well, what's he going to be doing after those 14 months? Is he going to go back to the same sort of activities that he was before? And one of the points of Akoba, which says, to ministers, ex-ministers and top civil servants, we have to look at what you're going to do post-retirement. But one of the points is that it seeks to ensure that while ministers and top civil servants are actually in power, they don't moderate their policies and statements with a view to what they might get employed by or who they might be employed by after they've left office. I mean, the temptation is, of course, not to be tough on China, say, if you're expecting China to give you large amounts of money post-retirement. And so I think that if there was a concerted move to revamp Akoba, lengthen the period of time and do other measures that they have oversight over how you earn money afterwards, that would go some way to reassuring us. Do I think that's going to happen? Very unlikely. I mean, it's not necessarily a question of Turkeys voting for Christmas, but they certainly won't vote not to be fed after before Christmas or after Christmas. But again, I would say, to the Labour Party, when you come into power, if you come into power, the first thing you should do is revamp Akoba, because the Chinese are interfering very much in our politics and in our society, and I think this would be a way of putting some brakes on that, but also, as I say, reassuring us that that they're taking it seriously. Let Labour do that. Preferably let the Conservatives do it right now.
And so with that in mind, Charles, how strict should standards be in that case for us, to enable trust in somebody like Lord Cameron? For example, if you envisage the standards that you would like to see in place, would he be Foreign Secretary now?
Well, I think that's why I think he needs to make a clear statement of what he intends to do vis-a-vis China, and to get the Foreign Office or the government to put out a clear statement of what its policy is, because we don't really know. I mean, they say they have a strategy, but it's secret. Well, that's not much use, because even most civil servants aren't classified to read that sort of material. So, I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt. He's been a loyal public servant. He's a talented man, but let him reassure us about the direction in which he's going. And I'm sure that people will be keeping a very close eye on that, and indeed a close eye on what he does after he leaves the post of Foreign Secretary.
And it is a fascinating dilemma, isn't it? If we consider the position of China, just finally, in terms of it being a security threat, a well-advertised and well-considered security threat, but also a trade and investment partner, actually the UK seemingly, I don't know if you would agree with this, but seemingly is struggling to sort of calibrate its approach to China because of those multiple concerns.
Yes, I agree. I think if I were Prime Minister or Foreign Secretary, I would also find it very difficult to get this balance correctly between preserving our national security, our long-term economic future, and our values against a regime that is antithetical to most of the way our systems are devised. But I think that the first step in that is a very clear awareness of what the Chinese Communist Party is and what it's about. I'm not sure that I detect that, certainly from some of the statements of Lord Cameron in the past, particularly with reference to the golden era. I mean, that was still being trumpeted by him many years after Australia and America and indeed people in the UK had woken up to what the Chinese Communist Party was doing. So I hope that he now has a clearer view of that and can get on with the very difficult problem of balancing those interests, our economic and other interests, global interests, health interests, climate change, etc., against the threats that the Chinese Communist Party brings to bear on us in our national security.